Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We sift through, well, all the noise, the research, everything out there, really, to bring you the core insights that actually matter.
That's the goal.
Today, we're diving deep into a pretty foundational work, Robert Fritz's The Path of Least Resistance. We're pulling directly from the book itself.
Good stuff.
And the mission here is to understand something, well, incredibly important for you listening: how to intentionally create the life you really want. By recognizing and then shifting these hidden structures that, shape your everyday path.
Exactly. And Robert Fritz, he's a fascinating figure, musician, successful artist, filmmaker too.
Right.
And he founded the Creating Skills courses. His big contribution is really in structural dynamics.
Structural dynamics. Okay.
Yeah, this really powerful way of understanding how these unseen structures just profoundly influence what we do, our outcomes.
And it's not just theory, right?
Oh, definitely not. It's had a real impact. Influenced thinkers like Peter Senge, the fifth discipline. And it's actually used in major Fortune 500 companies. He also wrote From Zero to Infinity and Corporate Tides.
And The Path of Least Resistance, it's not just Senge singing its praises. There's a whole range of endorsements, right?
A really diverse group, yeah. Matthew Uckman from Learning Tree International, he compared its impact on understanding creativity to Peter Drucker's influence on management.
Wow, that's high praise.
Huge. Saying it demystifies creativity makes it accessible. Then there's Larry Wilson, former CEO at Pecos River Learning Center. He called it rigorously tested, practical, profound but simple, effective, engaging.
And Willis Harman, author of Global Mind Change.
Harman pointed out how it helps us break free from that trap, either always fighting things or just passively going along.
Finding that third option.
Exactly. So what these endorsements really tell you, the listener, is this isn't just abstract stuff, it's practical. It's a way to unlock your potential, move beyond just reacting.
Like shifting from putting out fires to actually building the house you want.
Precisely. And the range of people who found value here is fascinating. Zhang Ning, creator of POA thinking, saw his own growth aligning with Fritz's creating mode. Piaohan Yizimao, author of 1 Year Tops 10, said it fundamentally changes how you think. More joy, passion, hope, significant development.
Ancient cognitive disruption.
Cheng Yi stressed how focusing only on problems can actually create structural roadblocks, the real drive in creation, completing meaningful work.
That makes sense. Jen Haxiat, the psychologist.
Yeah, author of The Remarkable Me, enthusiastically recommends it, notes how we get stuck resisting or complying, right? And how change often feels temporary, no real momentum.
So common.
And Zhou Mao from Relaxed Meditation stresses choosing based on desire, not just avoiding what you don't want.
Crucial distinction.
And Guolei, the investor, highlighted how it explains why we abandon goals to structural reasons and offers a framework to adjust.
So it's really about understanding these structures, structural dynamics.
Exactly. Think of a car. Thousands of parts, right? But you control it with just a few things. Gas, brakes, steering. Why? Because engineers designed a specific, effective structure.
Okay. Good analogy.
And the world ecology, society, business, skills, even parenting, it's full of these often unseen structures. Cheng Yi called mastering this like having a golden finger for your life.
Okay, now the edition we're digging into, it's not the original, is it? Fritz revisited it.
He did, wrote a new preface. It's really insightful. What started as a minor revision became 70% new content.
70%? Wow.
Yeah, he realized his understanding of the creative process had evolved so much, new insights he couldn't fully articulate before.
Shows how creation itself is unpredictable.
Totally. The joys, the frustrations. Fritz sees the creative process like a live performance, exhilarating, demanding, but ultimately deeply personal and empowering.
And for him, it's not just thinking, right? He developed courses.
Absolutely. The Creating Technology courses through his company DMA over 15 years. And the diversity of participants is incredible globally. Individuals, schools, even prisons, programs in rural Africa.
So his key takeaway from that
is that the capacity to create isn't rare. Most people can learn how to create intentionally.
And he's specific about creation and creativity.
Very. He roots them in art and science traditions, deliberately distinct from how those terms get used in, say, psychology or management training, but they can be kind of vague.
Right.
The courses teach creation through practice. Like learning any artistic skill, it's not just about the outcome, but applying these principles to life itself. It's a skill. It improves with time, with practice.
Which brings us to the core idea of the book.
Exactly. Understanding and changing the underlying structures in your life lets you follow the path of least resistance towards what you actually want.
And Fritz had this realization early on.
Yeah.
As a music student.
Yeah, he sensed something in composition beyond just technique, an unseen quality in great music. That led him to explore connections across creative fields, see how people use similar principles, often unconsciously, in daily life.
Okay, so that sets us up nicely for the 3 big insights we want to unpack for everyone listening, specifically curated for you.
Let's do it.
First, your life, like a river, naturally flows along the path of least resistance. Second, this path isn't random. It's shaped by these underlying structures in your life.
Key point.
And third, and this is the really empowering bit, these structures aren't fixed. You can understand them, you can change them, you can create the life you genuinely want.
That's the heart of it.
All right, so let's dive into that first insight, the path of least resistance.
Okay, Fritz starts with a great analogy. Boston's roads, his hometown.
Oh yeah, notoriously confusing streets.
Right, you wonder if there was any plan. But the reason? They mostly evolve from old cow paths.
Cow paths? Seriously?
Seriously. Cows naturally seek the easiest way, least effort. Avoid hills, obstacles. Over time, those paths get worn in, shape the landscape.
And then humans build roads right on top of them.
Exactly. It's a perfect illustration.
Of what principle?
That once a structure exists, energy flows along the path of least resistance within it. It's fundamental.
Laborers carving beds.
Or wind through mountains, electricity in a circuit, even people dodging each other on a busy sidewalk. We instinctively find the easiest way.
So how does this apply to us, to our lives? That's the first key insight.
Right. Fritz emphasizes this for you. Your life, right now, is following the path of least resistance.
Even if we want to change, like habits, diet, work patterns.
Especially then, you might want to change. You might even succeed for a bit. But there's often that pullback, right, to the old ways.
Yeah, definitely felt that.
Fritz says that's not weakness. It's not lack of willpower. It's because your life, as it is, has a certain structure. And that structure naturally guides you along a specific path.
So the structure is like the terrain for the cow.
Exactly. Or the riverbed for the water. It subtly, powerfully guides you back to the familiar, even if you don't want to be there.
Which leads to the second insight. This path isn't random.
No, it's dictated by these often hidden structures in your life. Just like terrain dictates cow paths.
And these structures exist whether we know about them or not.
Absolutely. Conscious awareness isn't required for them to exert influence. They form the unseen framework shaping how you live day in, day out.
That could be an aha moment for people feeling stuck.
I think so. Feeling stuck in patterns. Despite trying hard to change, relationships, career, health, you keep ending up back in the same place.
Yeah, that feeling of superficial change, but nothing really lasting. That sense that life should be different. Picture.
But feeling powerless to actually create that different reality.
Like the river, if the riverbed stays the same, the water keeps flowing the same way, it's just easier.
Precisely. If your fundamental life structures remain unchanged, you'll likely keep moving in the same direction, no matter how hard you consciously try to steer differently.
But, and this is the big one, the third insight, these structures can be changed.
Yes. This is the empowering part. They aren't fixed. You can change them.
Like engineers changing a riverbed.
Exactly like that. By consciously changing your basic life structures, your desires, beliefs, assumptions, aspirations, the reality you create, you can engineer a new riverbed for your own life.
One that naturally guides you where you want to go.
Yes. With those properly changed structures, the path of least resistance becomes your ally, not something to fight. It leads you directly to your goals.
Yeah.
Because that is the easiest way forward in the new structure.
Okay, so let's nail down what Fritz means by structure.
He defines it simply, the basic components of something, and how those parts relate to each other and the whole.
Like the human body.
Good example.
No.
Or even just pouring water into a glass.
Look.
The structure involves the glass, the water, the faucet, how much water you want.
And how much is currently there. Right.
So you have a goal, the desired amount, you see the current situation, amount already there. If there's a difference, a discrepancy, you take action.
Turn on the faucet.
Right, to resolve the discrepancy. Then you adjust, slow down, turn it off when you reach the goal. Even that simple act has a structure, with parts interacting predictably.
And this applies beyond physical things.
Absolutely. Fritz says there's a unifying structure in all things. Physical, like bridges, buildings, but also non-physical.
What?
The plot of a novel, the form of a symphony, the rhythm of a film, the rules of a sonnet. Tangible or not, a structure has related parts, and their interaction creates a tendency, a characteristic behavior.
Which leads to that vital insight.
Structure determines behavior. Always.
Can you give another example?
Think about navigating a building. You have options to get from A to B, maybe different floors, but your movement is fundamentally constrained by the structure. Walls, doors, stairs, elevators.
You can't just walk through walls.
Exactly. Your behavior, how you move, is determined by the structure, the building layout.
So in our lives, the structures dictating our path are
our desires, beliefs, assumptions, aspirations, and the objective reality we create and live in. Those are the deepest influences.
Now, Fritz stresses distinguishing this from psychology, right?
Very important point. Psychology studies mental states, thoughts, feelings. If this were just psychology, we'd focus on your thinking, your emotions.
But this is about
the nature of structures themselves and how they inherently influence behavior, sometimes independent of our immediate psychological state.
So structural dynamics is its own thing.
Fritz argues it stands alongside psychology. And when you apply structural principles to human behavior, two key ideas emerge.
Okay, what's the first?
Human behavior aligns with the underlying structures of their lives. Which shouldn't be shocking, really. We're part of nature, subject to natural laws.
But we often forget that connection.
Yeah, modern culture often teaches us to see nature as separate, something to use, tolerate, or even fight against.
Why do we do that?
Fritz thinks it's often not arrogance, but just a lack of understanding these structural principles. We genuinely feel like life is a struggle against external forces. Like that Hector Berlioz quote.
Which one?
Time is a great teacher, but unfortunately it kills all its pupils. Captures that feeling of struggle.
Okay. And the second principle?
Some structures are simply more conducive to desired outcomes than others.
Makes sense.
And importantly, these structures aren't personalized. If you're in a structure that causes frustration, it's not necessarily about you. Anyone in that same structure would likely have a similar experience, regardless of personality, intention, effort.
That really challenges the just try harder mentality.
Completely. Fritz is clear. We're not machines, we're complex individuals. But we're all subject to the influence of the structures we operate within. You can't fool the great structure, as he puts it.
So some structures lead to oscillation, back and forth.
Exactly. Like a pendulum.
Wow.
Its structure dictates that swing. Other structures, like a rocket, are designed for direct movement towards a goal.
Or a rocking chair versus a car.
Perfect. Rocking chair moves back and forth, limited range. Car lets the driver go almost anywhere.
And some people's lives feel like that rocking chair, that oscillation.
That's what Fritz suggests, progress, then regression. Push forward, slide back. Endlessly repeating it can feel like?
Changes feel temporary. Momentum isn't sustained.
Right. And you've probably felt this in some area of life, right? For some, it becomes the dominant pattern, like that Springsteen song.
One step up, two steps back. Yeah.
And if you don't realize, it's structural.
You wonder why you keep failing, why your efforts fall flat. It's discouraging. You feel like you're running in place.
Which is where the psychological explanations often come in.
Precisely. Self-sabotage, fear of success, self-destruction. These terms get used.
And the solutions offered focus on fixing those internal states.
Usually. Issues with self-worth. Why defeat your own efforts? What about success scares you? The focus is internal.
Yeah.
Emotions, needs, fears, instincts. Maybe it's your mother, childhood trauma, being weaned too early.
The list goes on. Endless potential explanations, all suggesting the root cause is within you, something broken that needs fixing to get back to normal.
And people spend a lot of time and money on this.
Huge amounts, trying to solve these perceived internal problems. And if they still don't succeed after resolving one issue, they look for another psychological problem to blame.
But Fritz argues,
if you're fundamentally trapped in an oscillating structure, no amount of psychological fixing will provide a lasting solution. Why? Because psychological methods don't address the underlying structure, and it's the structure causing the behavior.
So any positive impact is temporary?
Often, yes, followed by a return to the original pattern, one step forward, step back. Trying to solve a structural problem psychologically doesn't change the structure.
You might take time to revert. Weeks, months, years.
Could be. But when it happens, people are often shocked, disheartened, feel like they failed, lacked willpower.
But it might just be the structure reasserting itself.
Exactly. So if you're stuck in that cycle, it's not necessarily a personal flaw. It likely means you're in a structure that prevents lasting outcomes.
Which brings us to that crucial distinction, problem solving versus creation.
Yes. We're trained to see things we don't like as problems to be fixed. Our instinct is to eliminate the unwanted condition.
Oh, creation.
It's about bringing something new into being. The creation itself, the underlying intention is completely opposite.
Problem solving eliminates, creation brings forth.
Exactly. And thinking structurally lets you ask better questions.
Instead of how do I get rid of this?
You ask, what structure can I create to achieve my desired outcome?
And Fritz's company saw people do this, change their structures.
Countless students over 14 years, through the Creating Technology courses, they changed their lives not by solving problems, but by actively creating new structures.
And changing the structure changes the path of least resistance,
making it lead towards what they wanted. It's transformative.
It's interesting. He notes that major civilizational advances come from creation.
Yet most of us aren't taught the creative process itself. We're taught problem solving,
Which has a different structure.
a structure that oscillates. Often, the creative structure moves steadily towards the final creation, allows creators to consistently get results.
And that's the promise here for the listener.
That's the goal of this deep dive. Understand the creative process, its structures, so you can create your results. Make the path of least resistance work for you, not against you.
So it's not about fixing what's wrong, but building what's desired.
Precisely. Even if you're successful externally, if your underlying structure isn't creative, you can feel limited, unfulfilled. Tapping into a structure that yields results, not oscillation, that brings real, lasting success, increases the probability of achieving what you truly want.
Okay, so we've got the path of least resistance, the role of structures, the potential to change them, and shifting from problem solving to creating. Now, Chapter 2 delves into a really common structure, the resistance compliance orientation. Let's unpack that.
Right. Fritz starts by saying, this is way more than just an attitude. It's a fundamental way of life. A deep orientation where most of your actions are determined by your circumstances, current or anticipated.
And it starts early, in childhood.
Definitely. Think back. As kids, we're constantly learning limitations, boundaries, roles, how to dress, what to eat, how to cross the street. A big part of a child's job is just figuring out all the rules, expectations, social norms.
And the assumption is there's a right way to live.
Often, yeah. So the child's task becomes finding that right way. The world feels complex, confusing. Adult reasons aren't always clear or logical to a kid.
Adults ask you to do things you don't understand.
And imply you should understand. If you don't, it's somehow your fault.
Initially, kids assume adults know best.
Generally, yes. Adults seem magical, driving cars, fixing things, cooking. They speak with authority. Disobeying often leads to negative consequences.
But eventually, kids start testing boundaries, saying no.
Naturally. It gets tiring always being told what to do. Sometimes resistance works, gets attention. Even negative attention can be appealing. They learn subtle ways to get positive attention, too.
But sometimes resistance backfires.
Yeah, unexpectedly leads to trouble. Adult reactions feel unpredictable.
So the goal is just understanding how things work.
Pretty much. Kids gradually realize there are things they must know to function. Even partial understanding gets rewarded, or at least avoids trouble. They want more autonomy.
And they start seeing adults aren't infallible.
Right. Certain experiences reveal that. Fritz shares a funny story about his mom and his tongue turning blue if he lied.
Blue tongue.
Yeah, she'd look at his tongue. Seemed accurate. He believed lying made his tongue blue, until one day he knew he hadn't lied, but his tongue was still blue.
Huh. Crisis of faith.
Big time. Made him question the test, question if she was lying. It sparked broader questions about adult credibility.
So adults aren't always right.
The world still has rules, but the people enforcing them aren't infallible, so exploration shifts more to peers.
Friends become more important sources of info.
Increasingly, their insights on relationships, for example, might feel more relevant than parents' advice, even if it's not always accurate.
And kids learn adults can be unpredictable, unfair, even dishonest sometimes.
Through direct experience, yeah. So they develop strategies to avoid adult displeasure. Sometimes compliance, sometimes resistance.
A balancing act. Trying to find a middle ground.
Seems like it. A decision starts forming. Cooperate generally or push back more often. Cooperating brings approval. Obedience becomes habit. But sometimes compliance doesn't work. Still leads to disapproval.
Which might push a kid towards noncompliance.
Exactly, as a default strategy.
Then school adds another layer.
Another big framework. Initially accepted, there are different viewpoints: optimistic, pessimistic. Some encourage certain behaviors: helpful, neat, smart, strong, interesting.
Others focus on dangers: Self-protection, avoiding trouble.
Yeah, minimizing risk, creating caution, maybe even fear.
And during this time, we're influenced by lots of teachers.
Parents, school teachers, friends, enemies, heroes, rock stars, politicians, movie characters, media too, books, movies, TV, fashion, music.
It can lead to a search for life's truth, believing someone has the answers.
Yeah, trying to identify who has the reliable info, then emulating them.
Fritz mentions a study about adult communication with kids.
Really revealing. Researchers put recorders on kids, analyzed adult speech directed at them.
And the finding.
A staggering 85% was prohibitions or reprimands. Basically, don't do that, or you were bad wrong for doing that.
85%. Wow.
So the main lessons internalized are often about what's forbidden, what to avoid, strategies to prevent bad outcomes. Don't play in the street, don't bother your father, don't be late.
Parents mean well, trying to protect.
Of course. But this constant reinforcement of avoidance becomes a deeply ingrained habit, persists into adulthood even when the original reasons are irrelevant.
So the underlying message learned is,
the environment is the dominant force, reinforced everywhere. Parental praise punishment, school grades, societal rewards penalties.
good reactions get approval, wealth, status, relationships.
Bad reactions lead to prison, embarrassment, loss, broken relationships, even death in extremes.
So we come to believe the environment drives everything.
And if the environment is dominant, you feel you only have two choices.
Respond, comply, or react, resist.
The good boy, girl, or the rebellious soul.
And that's the essence of the resistance compliance orientation.
Exactly. Taking action based only on current or anticipated circumstances.
And education systems often reinforce this.
Inadvertently, yes. The goal often becomes fitting students into society, teaching appropriate reactions. Many kids adapt well, learn the rules, give the right answers.
Not necessarily out of love of learning.
But to gain approval, avoid trouble, fit in.
But some kids reject this.
Rubble.
Find it arbitrary, stifling, unjust, rebel against school, parents, society. But even then, Fritz points out, the environment is still the driving force. Their rebellion is defined by opposition to it.
Right. Parents of rebels wish they'd just make the right responses. Then you have the compliant students. Good grades, follow the rules meticulously, meet the standards set by teachers.
And this continues into adulthood?
Oh yeah. Human potential theories, self-help, often promise freedom but end up teaching new, sophisticated forms of compliance, adapting to life, to the world, as if the environment is in control.
Fritz is critical of this.
Very. Says they promise paradise through correct, compliant behavior, but it's a trap. Leads to a different kind of bondage.
Like dangling a carrot.
Exactly. Liberating consciousness, positive thinking, peak experiences, radical acceptance, creative problem solving, stress reduction. Often still focused on adapting yourself to the environment as master.
And the result.
Years later, people still can't consistently create what they truly want. They've just learned more formulas for compliance, because creation and compliance are fundamentally different.
Okay, what about the other side? Resistance.
Some people choose not to comply with family, school, society, might oppose openly or resist covertly, passively.
But the underlying belief is often the same, that life is driven by external forces.
Largely, yes. Their perception of what that environment is just differs from the majority view.
How does resistance manifest?
Cynicism, feeling mistreated, suspicion, being explosive, conspiracy theories, embracing political or religious views that oppose injustice or evil.
Fritz offers self-assessment questions for this.
Yeah. Do you feel long-term resistance to your environment? Do many beliefs, behaviors exist mainly to counter negative environments? Feel like you're in a constant struggle just to survive?
He tells that story about the tech company management team.
Oh, right. 40 minutes arguing over needing some level of agreement on a plan.
40 minutes. On that.
Incredible resistance, right, even to a basic premise. And this was supposedly the most rule-abiding, compliant team. Imagine the Mavericks.
We've all seen resistant types, haven't we? Work, family, politics.
Everywhere.
But Fritz notes, many rebels eventually adopt compliant behaviors.
Often, yes. Society sees it as successful socialization. But Fritz argues they're often still operating within that resistance compliance structure, just expressing it differently.
Yeah. And this creates a cycle between good person, compliant, and difficult person, resistant.
Exactly. You oscillate. Resentment builds during compliance, leads to resistance. But resistance feels powerless, leads back to compliance, maybe with guilt.
Or resistance leads to turmoil, consequences, then guilt pushes you back to compliance.
But the resentment builds again, the cycle repeats.
Some lean mostly one way, others oscillate constantly.
Right. But despite outward changes in behavior, attitude, beliefs, the underlying structure of reacting to or complying with the environment remains unchanged.
And the fundamental assumption underneath all this is,
you are powerless. If you habitually resist or comply, the power resides in the environment, not you. Because you don't believe you have the power to shape circumstances directly, you effectively become powerless. The environment seems huge, insurmountable.
even successful people might be driven by avoiding failure.
Often. Or others avoid success due to fear of negative consequences. Think of people staying in bad jobs to avoid the insecurity of finding a new one.
And whether successful or not, people in this orientation feel incomplete, unfulfilled.
Often, yes. The successful ones realize their achievements didn't bring deep satisfaction, a hollow victory,
Leading to feelings of purposelessness, powerlessness.
which can contribute to serious issues, Fritz suggests, like teenage suicide reacting against meaninglessness, or joining cults, rebelling against a perceived lack of meaning.
Historically, we look outward for solutions. Governments, science, leaders, therapies.
Consistently, assuming changing the external environment, better housing, healthcare, shorter work weeks will automatically change internal experience, lead to happiness, health, peace.
But it doesn't always work that way, does it?
No. Many people have those external advantages but are still unhappy, unhealthy, in turmoil. Fritz brings in Charles Ives disagreeing with Thoreau.
About returning to nature.
Yeah, Thoreau thought living in nature fosters transcendence. Ives observed people living naturally for generations often didn't achieve that. They were just mountain people.
Ives' point being,
Changing the external environment doesn't necessarily change internal experience.
even with big shifts like revolutions or technology.
People's underlying assumptions often stay the same. The forces shaping life are external. Farmer, factory worker, manager, stockbroker often feel power comes from the environment, which you must comply with or resist.
And internal factors, fear, anger, illness, personality, get treated like external forces too.
Yes. Internal externals, Fritz calls them. Things we feel unable to control directly.
Like my anger made me leave, my fear made me perform poorly, my bad relationship with my father means I can't.
Or my mind won't cooperate. My personality gets me in trouble. My stomach isn't used to spicy food. Internal states treated as external things happening to us.
So any stimulus, internal or external, that drives action within this orientation is an environmental stimulus.
Broadly, yes, it's a way of life. Constantly resisting or complying with stimuli you feel unable to control directly.
The environment always feels bigger than you. Only options are resistance or compliance.
Even if you temporarily conquer part of the environment, like a lion tamer, your life is still dictated by it, the lion.
He gives that detailed example of Karen at the party.
So relatable. She arrives, immediately scans for people to avoid,
Norma, the long talker. John, the complaining divorcee.
dodges Norma, gives John a quick hello and retreats, joins Greg's joke group, gets stuck with Jen talking carrot juice.
Then heads to the bar, spends the night strategically navigating, avoiding topics like travel or metaphysics.
Even subtly changes the subject with an interested guy when he might ask her out, a preventative tactic.
So her whole evening is resistance compliance strategies, avoiding unwanted interactions.
Exactly. The focus is always on the unwanted situation. Actions aim to ensure it doesn't happen.
Like worry and anxiety being forms of avoidance, trying to prevent negative outcomes.
Worrying about sickness, disapproval, losing your job, rejection, being the center of attention. Focus is on what you don't want, compelling preventative measures.
Fritz asks us to examine our own lives for this pattern.
Yeah. Staying in bad relationships to avoid loneliness. Ending relationships to avoid difficult emotions. Often boils down to which option feels less immediately uncomfortable. The underlying assumption, agency lies only in resisting or complying.
And beyond immediate avoidance, there's prevention, long-term strategies,
Right. Proactively trying to stop unwanted situations from ever arising.
like developing an assertive personality to avoid manipulation.
Or preemptive self-criticism in meetings. Appearing unreliable to dodge responsibility. A mask of arrogance to avoid closeness. Feigning sadness to avoid questions. Playing the victim. even selfless acts to avoid self-doubt.
Wow, these can be really subtle.
And become lifelong strategies, operating unconsciously. An early threatening experience can lead to tactics to prevent recurrence.
So people might describe their lives as great or balanced,
When really they're just conflict-free due to these long-developed avoidance strategies.
He tells the story of Frank, who grew up poor.
Yeah, his whole successful adult life was an elaborate prevention strategy against ever being poor again.
Meticulous budgeting, relentless earning, avoiding poverty media, limited social circle, extravagant gifts for kids.
Outwardly comfortable, successful, but underneath, deep insecurity, pervasive anxiety. His material abundance was a defense against poverty. His motivation was avoidance.
Career decisions, parenting, finances, avoiding old friends. All part of it.
Manifestations of the strategy. Many live good lives built on avoidance, building an insulated wall for false security, false certainty.
But is it fulfilling?
That's the question. Financial security isn't wrong, but Frank's motivation imprisoned him. Energy spent avoiding what he didn't want, not creating what he did.
Sacrificing what's truly desired for illusory security.
Leading to complacency, numbness, underneath the veneer, dissatisfaction, vulnerability, belief you can't control your life.
And it leads to cynicism, powerlessness.
Often, constant effort at avoidance leads to emptiness. Despite outward strength, Frank felt powerless, had to constantly control his environment to avoid his fear, never truly free.
So resistance leads to compliance. Compliance leads back to resistance. It's a closed system.
A constantly cycling, self-reinforcing system.
And trying to change it from within that orientation only strengthens it.
That's Fritz's crucial point. Trying to resolve, change, break through, accept, reject, bypass it from within just reinforces the pattern.
So what's the advice? Don't try to change it immediately.
Not through sheer will or new beliefs within the same framework. That likely fails, might even strengthen it. Instead,
Develop a deeper understanding first.
yes, understand the structural mechanisms at play, how they operate. That's preparation for shifting to a new orientation, one where creativity takes precedence.
Okay, so we've thoroughly unpacked that resistance compliance orientation. Now, Chapter 3 makes a really striking point. Creation has nothing to do with problems. Seems counterintuitive.
It does at first glance, but it's crucial for understanding how to create the life you want.
So when people link problems and creation,
They usually mean finding clever ways out of difficulties. A style, Fritz says, not the substance of creation as artists and scientists practice it.
he insists problem solving and creation are fundamentally different.
Totally distinct. Problem solving aims to eliminate an unwanted situation, the problem. Creation aims to bring something new into being, the creation.
Opposite intentions, different structures.
Exactly. And because most of us are raised in a problem-solving tradition with limited exposure to the creative process, the distinction gets blurred,
Hence, creative problem solving.
which often just obscures the difference. The typical problem solver's path: define problem, generate solutions, implement best one.
Eliminates the problem, maybe, but doesn't necessarily create a desired outcome.
Right, it doesn't inherently lead to bringing something new and valuable into existence.
Fritz talks about problem consciousness being pervasive in society.
Yeah, it uses political candidates as an example. Election cycles are dominated by lists of problems: deficit, competition, poverty, defense, homelessness, crime, drugs, education, environment, on and on.
Then local problems during primaries. Iowa farms, Michigan auto industry.
And Fritz asks, does listing problems mean you understand their causes or can solve them? And even if you solved every problem, would that automatically create the society we want?
He contrasts this with great leaders, originators, creators.
Like Churchill, Roosevelt, even during crises like war or depression, they weren't only solving problems, they were actively building their vision of an ideal future society. Not just alleviating suffering, but laying foundations.
But understanding problems is part of the creative process.
Absolutely. Understanding the current situation, including problems, is a necessary first step. But relying on problem solving as the primary means to create a desired life or society, Fritz says that's ineffective. Often fails to address underlying issues, just provides temporary relief.
He uses the Ethiopian famine example.
A powerful illustration. Experts foresaw it, but action only happened when the crisis was catastrophic, fueled by harrowing images.
The obvious solution was food. Aid poured in.
Saved lives, definitely, in the short term. But the underlying causes, political instability, lack of sustainable agriculture, remained unaddressed.
The aid bought time, But the time wasn't used effectively.
To create the conditions for long-term self-sufficiency. So after the immediate crisis eased, the tragedy continued, just with less media attention.
Was aid wrong?
Not necessarily in an immediate crisis, you have to act. But it's crucial to see it often just buys time. If that time isn't used to create a viable, sustainable structure, the tragedy recurs.
Solving the immediate problem wasn't enough.
Fundamentally insufficient for lasting change. The driving force for the aid was the severity of the problem. Media attention faded, action decreased, but the underlying conditions persisted. Starvation continued.
And this reveals that pattern in problem-driven action.
That oscillating pattern again, problem worsens, action taken, problem improves, motivation decreases, problem persists or worsens.
Because the action is motivated by the problem. If the problem improves, motivation drops.
Exactly. Problem, action, improvement, less action, problem persists, worsens.
And this applies personally too, not just global issues.
Absolutely. Relationships, jobs, health, finances. Life can feel like a series of problems to solve. We focus energy on getting rid of them.
Yet they persist, or new ones pop up.
Motivation spikes when things get bad, drops when they improve slightly. Making problem solving as a way of life ultimately unsuccessful for lasting change.
He mentions interviewing management candidates.
And so many boasted about loving problem solving. Highlights how valued it is perceived to be.
Why? Does it feel important?
Fritz suggests it does. Dealing with important problems makes you feel important. Managers are trained to think this way. Senior managers handle bigger problems.
But it can create a false sense of security.
Right.
Productivity.
Yeah, gives a clear focus. Find problem, fix problem. But what happens when there are no problems? What do you focus on then?
Having a problem organizes your time, thoughts, actions.
Allows you to avoid deeper thinking about goals. Focus on what's wrong, rehash it, makes you feel indispensable, fighting adversity, a distraction, really.
Okay, what about the creative approach to problem solving? Brainstorming.
Fritz sees that mostly as finding unusual ways to overcome difficulties. Style, not substance. Different from how artists create. A painter isn't solving the problem of a blank canvas.
Brainstorming uses free association, suspends judgment.
To break conventional thinking, generate alternative solutions.
And the liberating your imagination approach, also rooted in problem solving.
Often, yeah. Assumes creativity is limited by habits, beliefs, psychological barriers. The solution is to break through those barriers, free the mind.
Avoid ordinary thinking, seek new associations, suspend judgment.
That's the idea.
But Fritz critiques this unlocking theory, using Beethoven.
Powerfully. Says Beethoven didn't suddenly unlock higher creativity. It wasn't instant. He didn't meditate his way to genius.
It was through experience, practice, hard work.
Years of it. His early work resembled Mozart, Haydn. His unique style evolved over time through constant creative engagement.
And his greatness was linked to his life, his character.
Inextricably. He integrated all of his life, spiritual, sensual, mundane, into his work. He was a master technician who used his life as raw material. It was a lifelong journey, not a sudden breakthrough.
Roger Sessions analyzed Beethoven's process.
Noted how Beethoven meticulously built patterns, tested themes and drafts. Inspiration arose from focused work, not random association.
So creators don't just imagine, they bring it into reality.
Crucial ability, developed through practice. Each creation builds on the last, an evolutionary process.
Fritz rejects the idea of a single key to creativity.
Finds no merit in it, superficial concept.
Like the piano analogy. Just telling someone to press keys doesn't make them a pianist.
Right, and just encouraging unconventional thinking doesn't automatically make someone a creator.
He critiques creativity tests too, like listing uses for a brick.
Says they equate problem-solving's divergent thinking with genuine creation. Frank Lloyd Wright might fail that test if he only saw bricks for building.
What's the key question these theories overlook?
What do I want to create? The creativity isn't just generating options, but the path from concept to finished creation.
He uses that as a litmus test.
Yeah.
Can you create music with that theory?
Provocative, right. Doubts Mozart used brainstorming for Figaro, given his speed and complexity, incompatible methods.
And Beethoven's sketchbooks. Focused study, not free association.
Detailed melodies, variations, exploring structural interactions. Judgment was enhanced, not suspended.
So creative styles vary, but they're always driven by the envisioned outcome.
Always. Judgment is central. Creators refine possibilities based on familiarity with the process. Leads to elegance of means, direct path.
So it's about focusing the mind, not freeing it.
Yes. Focus on the desired final product.
Like the fishing analogy.
Freeing the mind is like fishing aimlessly, hoping for anything. Creating is knowing the fish you want, using the right gear, technique.
There are unknowns, but knowing the goal focuses effort.
Exactly, not random activity. Focusing just on problems fails because people often give problems significance simply because they don't know what they want to create instead.
He brings in Carl Jung's insight here.
That life's most important problems are often fundamentally insoluble. They're solved by being outgrown, overshadowed by a new, larger life focus that makes the old problem lose urgency.
So effort spent only solving problems is largely unproductive, lacks lasting value.
Because it remains reactive, a correct response to an existing condition, the problem.
And practically, most people using problem-solving strategies give up.
Yeah, he tells that story of his friend's company, invested heavily in problem-solving techniques.
But didn't use the ideas, found them interesting, but impractical, irrelevant.
Exactly.
He uses the health analogy too, relieving illness versus creating a healthy body.
Fundamentally different. Even psychotherapy, influenced by Freud, often operates on a medical model. Identify problem, fix problem, alleviate suffering.
He acknowledges problem-solving's value in some areas. Medicine. John Huston's quote.
Take the surgery. Yes, medicine is vital for curing illness, but
It doesn't create health, just reduces disease.
crucial distinction. Reducing the negative versus proactively fostering the positive.
And art's tradition clearly distinguishes creation from problem-solving.
Consistently. Understanding this is vital if you want to create your desired life. Problem solving often perpetuates the unwanted, doesn't achieve the desired.
Which brings us back to contrasting the Ethiopian famine approach with the Uganda project.
Right. The Uganda project, which Fritz joined, was founded on the idea that the creative process could be the foundation for development.
Not external aid solving problems, but training locals to create the lives they wanted.
Even in Uganda, with its history of oppression, prejudice, famine, war, economic decline, a challenging but representative place.
And Han and Silvana Veldkamp, the experienced UN workers who initiated it.
They were disillusioned with traditional problem-focused aid, envisioned a locally driven self-sufficiency approach through training.
So DMA designed a program integrating the creative process with efforts in food, agriculture, health, water, education.
And a key element, training Ugandan leaders at the UN to become instructors themselves, who then returned to implement it in their villages.
And the results.
Significant, seemingly impossible changes in just a few years in those specific villages, despite ongoing national problems.
The villagers became increasingly able to create their desired lives, even in unfavorable circumstances.
Yes. Local economies flourished in the initial 6 villages, independent of the national economy, because they had the capacity to create the communities they wanted.
Moving stories of improved livelihoods, achieved with fewer resources than traditional aid.
Many stories. Thousands of lives improved, with a fraction of the usual spending.
Fritz quotes Molemu Mushesha Jr. describing Uganda in '81.
Dire situation after Amin. Destruction, poverty, people had lost hope, relied on aid, led to the African Food and Peace Foundation, the Uganda program.
Mushesha describes the first village meeting in '82.
Villagers focused on problems, needs. We have nothing. Listed diseases, exploitation, wildlife damage, lack of medicine, high transport costs, complained about the regime, low prices, felt helpless, wanted problem solved.
But the program's assumption was different.
Fundamentally, that Ugandans, like everyone, hold the key to their own success. They have the inherent ability and wisdom.
So the trainees shifted the focus.
First, identify current reality, the Kahum situation. Then, crucially, envision desired lives, homes, villages, dreams, or visions.
Moving from what they didn't want to what they did want, and working collaboratively to create it.
That shift was transformative. Actions became driven by desire, like securing clean water, 12 new sources where only 2 had appeared in 8 years.
Improving health, sanitation, led by local leaders who emerged.
David Abundanabo, Margaret Nzezi, Peter Cario, David Wakesa, organizing their communities.
Other examples?
Yakahama youth, building a school, a road, Rikuba women clearing bush, creating a fish pond for food and income.
Amos Toyakayo compared it to past projects.
Noted their enjoyment, engagement in their own efforts, unlike externally imposed ones.
Faith Tindamadiel spoke about learning skills, but most importantly,
Learning to live and work together, overcome disagreements.
and the official, Paul Nyakairu, said,
This program made us know ourselves. We have a responsibility to take ourselves seriously.
so the takeaway from Uganda,
When people understand themselves, own their destiny, they achieve significant development. Contrast that with problem-solving interventions that perpetuate helplessness. It showed the power of people working together towards a shared vision, driven by desire, not obligation.
And Fritz's final assertion for the chapter.
No one can solve all their problems. Without knowing how to create what you want, new ones always arise. Only through creation can you move beyond that cycle.
That distinction between problem-solving and creation is just fundamental to this whole framework. Okay, so chapter 4 digs deeper. What creation is.
Right, and he starts by saying artists have the deepest understanding of the creative process, its potential. They're valuable teachers.
It's a different skill set than school or work teaches.
Often, yes. But one of the most important life skills. He shares an anecdote about a taxi ride through East Harlem,
where he lived after music school, contrasting it with Boston.
Initially saw it as a cultural desert compared to Boston's richness.
But memory is selective.
He started recalling good times, but also the emergence of graffiti art there,
which evolves significantly.
From destructive tagging to complex, skilled artistic expressions, young artists competing in originality, skill, channeling energy into art, not violence. Subway cars became the canvas.
And the subway authorities became unintentional curators.
Exactly. Showcasing the art daily led to more development, eventually attention from the mainstream art world. Artists moved to canvas, galleries, temporary success for some.
And the form kept evolving. A prominent artist invited to Tokyo.
Yeah, shows the global reach it achieved. Fritz reflects on how improbable it seemed kids from a perceived cultural desert achieving recognition through graffiti, breakdancing, rap. Challenges ideas about where creativity comes from.
He saw a newer form later. Pastels, softness, depth.
Saw it as a hopeful sign of human creativity's endurance.
The key lesson from graffiti.
The human spirit's inherent drive to create, regardless of environment, challenges the idea that comfort is needed for creation. Creativity often emerges from challenge, not just institutions. Maybe being a creator is fundamental human nature, capable of manifesting anywhere.
And creation is fundamentally different from responding or resisting the environment.
Totally different. The creative process has its own momentum, not dictated by circumstances.
He challenges the belief that creativity is a product of the environment. Cites corporate environment remodeling.
Yeah, it says history shows creation happens in diverse, often difficult settings.
So our current situation doesn't determine what we can create.
It imposes limitations, yes, but doesn't define our potential.
And because creation is so different from resistance compliance, the question of whether your life will change becomes almost absurd once you engage in it.
That's his point. He acknowledges skepticism maybe sounds like a pep talk, or maybe only artists can do this.
But he clarifies, it applies to anything you desire, not just art.
Right. Career, relationships, health. No need to separate artistic creation from other forms, and art provides an ideal learning ground for the techniques.
Reiterating that artists have the deepest understanding, making them good teachers. Different skills than traditional learning, but crucial life skills.
Exactly. He shares Pablo Casal's view, too, that manual labor is also creative, deserving respect.
In Carl Rogers' broad definition, a child's game, Einstein's theory, a new sauce, a first novel, no hierarchy.
Right. Fritz then says lack of understanding leads to seeing creation as mysterious, unconscious, mystical.
Like searching for a secret key to unlock hidden abilities.
He uses Dumbo and the magic feather analogy. Belief empowers an inherent ability. Dumbo could always fly.
Theories about a key to creativity are like the feather, lacking substance.
Pretty much. Like primitive tribes misinterpreting airplanes. Lack of experience leads to attributing the unknown creation to magic.
But creation is learnable, like any skill. Requires practice. You learn by doing.
That's his core message. It's cultivable.
Which leads to the 5 basic steps of the creative process. Not a rigid formula.
No, more like different types of action phases, varying activity, passivity skills needed. Each project is unique, those skills improve.
Okay, what are the 5 steps again? Overview.
1, think clearly about what you want to create. 2, know where you are in relation to it. 3, take action. 4, follow the rhythm of the process. 5, build momentum.
Let's break down the first. Think clearly about what you want to create.
Creators start with the end in mind, a concept of what they're aiming for. Before creating, know the goal.
Can the initial concept be vague or clear?
Both work. Some improvise from a general idea, painter not knowing the final image. Others have a clear vision first, Georgia O'Keeffe waiting till the idea was fully formed.
And knowing what you want is a skill itself. not encouraged by education.
Right. Education often focuses on selecting correct, compliant responses, unrelated to personal desires, leads to ambiguity about what we want. But in creation, clarifying desires is meaningful, engaging.
Okay, step 2. Know where you are in relation to your creation.
Crucial. Objectively assess the current state. Like a painter seeing how much canvas is covered to know what's next. Need accurate understanding of progress.
Requires objectivity.
Which is a skill, and often underdeveloped. People bias observations, embellish success, downplay shortcomings. A key skill for creators is objective assessment.
Like art students learning to draw a model accurately, or music ear training.
Exactly. Observing and reproducing accurately. Identifying rhythms, harmonies objectively. Correct answers get marks, incorrect don't. Shows objective assessment can be trained.
So we need to cultivate that ability to see reality objectively.
Yes. Many find reality unsettling, distorted, lying, rationalizing, distracting via problem solving. But mastering the creative process develops the ability to face reality, wanting to know the actual situation, good, bad, or indifferent.
Step 3, take action.
Once you know what you want and where you are, act. But what action? Creation involves innovation, different from tradition-focused education. So many lack innovation experience.
But innovation is a cultivable skill.
Fritz says yes. Action is taken towards the idea, potential for success or failure. Successful actions can continue or stop. Observe changing effects to inform next steps.
All actions contribute, effective or not, because it's a learning process.
Exactly. Learning what works, what doesn't. Creators' ability lies in experimenting and evaluating results.
Not just trial and error. Develop intuition, elegance of means.
Yes, over time. More experience increases intuition. Takes time. Most actions won't hit the goal directly. The art is knowing when to adjust.
The pressure to get it right first time or be perfect hinders adjustment.
Can do. Realizing the idea might require veering off course, not sticking rigidly to the plan. Encouraging perseverance without strengthening adjustment skills can fail.
Just hanging in there can be like hitting your head against a wall.
Yeah.
Makes quitting the path of least resistance.
Could be. Habitual quitting might not be a character flaw. What sustains creation isn't willpower, but learning by doing. Continuous adaptation.
Okay, step 4. Follow the rhythm of the creative process.
3 distinct phases. Germination, assimilation, completion. Each with unique energy, types of action.
Germination.
Starts with excitement, novelty, energy from newness.
Assimilation.
Least outwardly apparent. Initial excitement fades. Focus shifts from internal inspiration to external action, experimentation. Idea is internalized, generating quieter energy for learning. Shapes the creation.
Completion.
Energy similar to germination, but applied to concrete activity. Finishes the current creation, prepares for the next.
And the 5th step. Build momentum.
Many theories seem to rely on beginner's luck, but professionals emphasize momentum. Creative process is reliable, builds on itself.
Who has higher probability of success? Novice or experienced creator?
Generally the experienced one. Debut classics are exceptions. Even Mozart improved over time. Later works surpassed earlier ones.
More compositions led to greater ability. Accumulated experience provides momentum.
Exactly. If you start creating what you want today, you'll be better prepared to create what you want in 10 years. Each project builds experience, knowledge, capability.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got the 5 steps. Now, chapter 5 brings it all together, the creative orientation.
Right. And in this orientation, the most powerful question you can ask is, what do I want?
Simple, but potent. Ask anytime, anywhere. Focuses on the outcome.
Yes. Or even better, what do I want to create?
He contrasts the structure again. Resistance compliance oscillates.
While the creative process is steadfast, unwavering, directed towards the goal.
And creation is an orientation, just like resistance compliance.
Exactly. People in resistance compliance might sometimes create. People in a creative orientation might sometimes resist or comply.
Your dominant orientation depends on where you spend most of your time, reacting or creating.
Yes. And the difference is huge. First, makes you subject to fickle environments. Second, makes you the creative force, using the environment as a tool.
The transition is simple, but complex.
Living in creation isn't hard, but it's unusual. Challenging to embrace after years of learned reactive behavior.
Experiencing the process helps, but it's more a distinct realization, not gradual.
Often, yes. Once you're in the creative orientation, it's clear.
Resistance compliance feels like being in a maze. Limited life, navigating obstacles, lesser of two evils.
That's the feeling.
Whereas the creative orientation feels interesting, stimulating, distinctive.
Because new possibilities constantly emerge naturally. Not because creators try to make it fun.
But it's not constant elation. Creators feel the full range of emotions.
Absolutely. Hope, joy, frustration, sadness. Just like anyone else.
But the difference is how emotions are used. Resistance compliance lets emotions dictate life. Use them as signals to resist or comply, leading to futile hope for better environments.
Exactly. Always seeking the right job, partner, situation, believing external change brings internal peace.
Creators understand emotions don't necessarily reflect rightness or wrongness.
They know joy can happen in dire times, regret in joyful times, wisdom that emotions are transient, don't need to control life. They create regardless of emotional state.
Okay, what about the spirit of creation? Contrasting typical advice.
Resistance compliance advice is often about adopting appropriate reactions. Relax, be brave, get into it, nothing you can't do. But the creator's drive is different.
It's an inner drive.
A powerful desire to bring the creation into being. Creating for the sake of creation itself, not for validation, ROI, or judgment.
Like Robert Frost's quote.
All the fun's in how you say a thing captures that spirit.
He uses the analogy of loving your children for who they are, not personal gain, their independent existence.
Compares that to the creator's experience. Bring the work into being, allow it to exist independently, separate from you, though it came from you.
And separating from the creation leads to understanding creativity as love.
You create because you love it, want it to exist, acknowledges its cliche but asserts its reality. Why create something you don't love?
He shares that personal story from his undergraduate days, debating God with the chaplain.
Yeah, the unmoved mover. Chaplain says God created the world out of love. Fritz was skeptical. Chaplain admitted it was faith, which wasn't enough for Fritz then, but the idea lingered.
And later, composing music, he realized.
He was creating out of love for the piece, the desire for it to exist. Suddenly understood how God, as ultimate creator, might have created out of love.
If the chaplain understood the creative process better.
Could have shared that insight by simply asking Fritz why he composed, instead of relying on doctrine, complying with his religious environment rather than direct experience.
And Fritz concludes, once you personally discover this principle, creation driven by desire, love for the creation, there's no turning back.
Your life is forever changed.
A powerful place to end. That brings us to the conclusion of this deep dive into Robert Fritz's The Path of Least Resistance. We really hope this has given you, our listeners, a valuable new lens on the forces shaping your life and the incredible power you have to become the active creator of your own future.
Hope it sparks some new thinking.
Join us next time for another deep dive right here